I still remember the exact sound that made my heart stop. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was my son crying, in a way I had never heard before. When I pushed the front door open, the house felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Like something inside it had been holding its breath. And then I heard it again, those broken, trembling sobs coming from the living room. "Mommy." Patrick. I dropped my keys without even realizing it and rushed forward. He was on the floor, curled into himself, his small hands gripping his arms like he was trying to disappear. His face was red, his breathing uneven, his whole body shaking. And Jordan, my husband, was standing just a few feet away, watching, not moving, not kneeling, not even reaching out, just watching. "What happened?" I asked, dropping beside Patrick and pulling him into my arms. Jordan shrugged. "I don't know. He just started crying. Just started crying." The words echoed in my head, hollow and wrong, because nothing about this felt like something that just happened. Patrick buried his face into my shoulder, his fingers clutching the fabric of my blouse so tightly it hurt. I could feel his heartbeat racing against my chest. Too fast. Too scared. "It's okay," I whispered, even though I wasn't sure it was. "Mommy's here." He didn't answer. He didn't even look up. That was the first thing that terrified me. The second was Jordan. I glanced up at him, expecting something, concern, confusion, anything, but his expression was calm. Too calm. Like this wasn't his problem. Like this wasn't his son. "What do you mean you don't know?" I pressed, trying to keep my voice steady. "You were here." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling like I was the one being difficult. "I told you." He was fine. And then he wasn't. Kids do that. Kids do that. I stared at him for a second longer than I should have. Something in my chest tightened. Not just from fear, but from a quiet, creeping realization that I couldn't explain yet. I forced myself to look away and focused on Patrick again. "Hey," I said softly, brushing his hair back. "Can you tell Mommy what happened?" He shook his head instantly. Too fast. His grip on me tightened. And then, just for a second, his eyes flickered past me, toward Jordan. I felt it like a cold wave running down my spine. This wasn't just fear. This was silence. The kind of silence that comes from being afraid to speak. I slowly stood up, still holding Patrick close, and let my eyes move across the room. At first glance, everything looked normal. Too normal. Then the details started to surface. A toy car lay on its side near the coffee table. Its plastic frame snapped clean in half. Patrick loved that car. He never broke his toys. A chair was slightly out of place, angled just enough to feel wrong. And on the hardwood floor, there was a faint scrape mark. Long. Uneven. Like something had been dragged. My pulse quickened. "Jordan," I said, my voice quieter now. Sharper. "Did anyone come by today?" There was a pause. It was small, almost invisible. But I saw it. "No," he said. "Why would anyone come by?" "Why would anyone come by?" I nodded slowly, as if I believed him. But something inside me had already shifted. Because that hesitation, that wasn't confusion. That was calculation. Patrick shifted in my arms, his breathing still uneven. I crouched down again and gently set him on the couch. "I'm just going to check something." "Okay," I told him softly. He didn't respond. But he didn't let go of my sleeve either. His fingers clung to me. Like if he let go, something bad would happen again. "I'll be right here," I reassured him. Then I stood up. Jordan's voice followed me. "What are you doing?" I didn't turn around immediately. I kept my movements slow, controlled, like everything was normal. "Just checking something," I said. I walked down the hallway toward the security panel mounted on the wall. I could feel his eyes on my back, heavy and watchful. The system screen lit up as I touched it. For a moment, my hands hesitated, because once I pressed play, there would be no going back. Behind me, I heard Jordan shift slightly,
Too quiet.
Too careful. I entered the passcode and pulled up the camera feed timeline. My fingers moved automatically, muscle memory guiding me through the interface I had set up myself months ago. I scrolled back to earlier that afternoon. There it was. A timestamp. I tapped it. The video loaded slowly, frame by frame. I leaned in, my breath catching as the image sharpened. At first, it was just Patrick. Alone. Playing. Nothing unusual. I almost exhaled in relief. Almost. Because then I noticed something. A flicker at the edge of the screen. Movement. Not Patrick. Not Jordan. Someone else? My hand froze on the screen as the figure stepped slightly into view. I leaned closer, my heart pounding louder with every second. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever had happened in this house, I was about to see the truth. I didn't react. Not the way I wanted to. Not the way a wife should when she realizes something is wrong. I just stood there, staring at the screen for a second longer than necessary, then quietly turned it off. I think it's just a delay, I said, keeping my voice light, almost dismissive. The system glitches sometimes. Jordan didn't answer right away. I could feel him behind me, watching, measuring. Then, finally, yeah, probably. I nodded, like that was enough, like I believed him. Then I turned back toward the living room, forcing my face into something soft, something normal, even as my mind refused to slow down. Patrick was still on the couch, curled into himself, his small body tense. I walked over and sat beside him, pulling him gently into my arms again. "It's okay," I whispered. But this time, I wasn't saying it to him. I was saying it to myself, because whatever I had just seen, it wasn't okay. Not even close. That night, after Patrick finally fell asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at nothing. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. Clean counters, soft lighting, quiet suburban calm. From the outside, anyone would have said we had a perfect life. And maybe that was the problem, because I had believed it too. I was 32 years old, a financial analyst in New York. My entire career was built on finding patterns, spotting inconsistencies, and identifying risk before it became damage. I could look at numbers, thousands of them, and immediately tell when something didn't add up. But somehow, I had missed what was happening inside my own home. I let out a slow breath and leaned back in my chair. Jordan had always been the confident one, the successful one, the man people admired without question. He knew how to talk, how to present himself, how to make everything look effortless. And I had trusted that, not blindly, and I told myself, just comfortably. We lived in a quiet neighborhood in New Jersey. Tree-lined streets, predictable routines, the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. Jordan left early. I worked long hours. Patrick stayed with a sitter during the day. We had structure, stability. At least, that's what I had believed. Now, sitting there in the silence, I started replaying things I hadn't thought about in months. Small things. Things I had dismissed at the time. Jordan insisting on managing most of our joint finances. "It's just easier," he had said. "Less stress for you?" Late nights that didn't quite make sense. Business dinners that ran too long. Calls he would take in another room. I had noticed. Of course I had. But I hadn't pushed. Because pushing would have meant questioning. And questioning would have meant admitting something might be wrong. I closed my eyes for a second. He didn't want me to look too closely. I thought, and I hadn't. That realization settled heavy in my chest. Then there was Logan, Jordan's younger brother, 27. A lawyer. Sharp. Controlled. Always composed. He had this way of speaking that made everything sound reasonable, even when it wasn't. Whenever something complicated came up, contracts, paperwork, anything legal, Logan handled it. Quietly. Efficiently. Without questions. At the time, I had told myself it was helpful. Now, it felt different. too convenient, too involved. And then there was Tiffany. I opened my eyes again, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the dark kitchen window. Tiffany had been introduced as a professional contact, a healthcare administrator Jordan worked with occasionally. Polite, calm, always composed. She smiled easily, spoke carefully, never overstepped, at least not in a way that was obvious. But she had been in this house more than she should have been. I remembered that now. Visits that happened when I wasn't home. Casual explanations that didn't quite explain anything. And Patrick... My stomach tightened. Patrick had never liked her. I had noticed it before. The way he went quiet when she was around. The way he stayed close to me. Avoided eye contact with her. I had thought it was just a phase. Children do that sometimes. They react to unfamiliar people. That's what I had told myself. But today, when I asked him what happened, he hadn't looked at me. He had looked at Jordan. I sat up straighter. That wasn't random. That wasn't fear from an accident. That was fear from something or someone. This wasn't one moment. I thought slowly. This was a pattern. A pattern I had ignored. I stood up and walked back toward the hallway. My steps quiet. Careful. The security panel was still dark. Inactive. Waiting. I stared at it for a moment. Then I turned my head slightly, glancing toward the living room. Jordan was still there. On his phone now. Relaxed. Like nothing had happened. Like everything was under control. I walked back toward him, keeping my expression neutral. Did Tiffany stop by today? I asked casually. It was a simple question. Simple enough that the answer should have come immediately. But it didn't. There it was again. That pause. Barely a second. Then. No. Just one word. Flat. Clean. A lie. I didn't react. Didn't even blink. Okay, I said, like it didn't matter. But inside, everything shifted into place. The hesitation. The calm. The silence from Patrick. The footage. This isn't random. I thought. This is coordinated. Jordan looked back down at his phone. Already moving on. Already confident. And that was the moment I understood something that changed everything. He didn't think I knew. Which meant he wasn't hiding anymore. I turned away slowly, my mind already moving faster than my body. Because if there was one thing I had learned from years of analyzing financial systems, it was this. Nothing complicated ever starts big. It starts small, subtle, invisible, until one day, you finally see the pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I walked back down the hallway, my eyes drifting once more to the security system. The image from earlier flashed in my mind. That figure, that movement, that moment just before everything changed. This didn't start today, I whispered to myself. It's been happening for a long time. And whatever I had just seen was only the beginning. I didn't press play right away. My finger hovered over the screen, just inches from the timeline, as if that small distance could protect me from whatever I was about to see. Behind me, I could still feel Jordan's presence. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to remind me that I wasn't alone. That he was watching, waiting. I angled the screen slightly, just enough so he couldn't see clearly. I just want to make sure everything's fine, I said, keeping my tone casual. He didn't answer. That silence told me more than words ever could. I tapped the screen. The footage loaded. At first, everything looked normal. Patrick was in the living room, sitting on the rug, pushing his toy car back and forth. His small voice hummed softly to himself. Completely unaware of anything being wrong, I exhaled. Just slightly, maybe I had overreacted. Maybe this really was just one of those things. Kids cried. They got scared. They fell. It happened. I leaned closer to the screen, watching carefully. Patrick stood up, walked toward the coffee table, picked something up, then dropped it again. Nothing unusual. Everything felt calm. Too calm. My eyes shifted to the timestamp, and that's when I saw it. The numbers didn't move the way they should have. There was a jump, a small one, but enough. I frowned and rewound the clip. Watched it again. Then again. The same result. The timeline skipped forward. Not seconds. Minutes. A chunk of time was missing. My chest tightened. I scrubbed back further, searching for the transition point. When the footage cut, where the gap began, there. A clean break. No distortion. No glitch. Just absence. This isn't a system error, I thought, because I had seen errors before. They were messy. Corrupted frames. Lag. This was precise. Deliberate. Someone had removed that part. I swallowed slowly. My mouth suddenly dry. Something wrong? Jordan asked behind me. I didn't turn around. No, I said. Just checking the timing. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. I pressed play again. The footage resumed after the gap, and that's when she appeared. Tiffany. She stepped into the frame like she belonged there. Not hesitant. Not cautious. Comfortable? She didn't knock. She didn't pause. She walked straight into my house. My stomach dropped. For a second, I just stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were clearly seeing. She wasn't supposed to be here. I thought, she said she wouldn't be here. But there she was, in my living room, in my life. Patrick froze when he saw her. I could see it clearly now. His body stiffened, his movements slowing, his eyes lifting toward her with something that wasn't confusion. It was fear. My grip on the edge of the console tightened. Tiffany said something. I couldn't hear it clearly, but her tone was sharp, controlled, not kind, not gentle. Patrick took a step back, then another, and then Jordan entered the frame. Not surprised, not confused. He walked in like he had been expecting her, like they had already been talking. My heart started pounding harder. No, I whispered under my breath. No, because there was no hesitation between them. No explanation. No, what are you doing here? Just familiarity. They were already aligned. They stood close to each other, speaking in low voices. Their conversation was tense. Clipped. I leaned closer, straining to catch anything. You said it would be handled. Tiffany snapped. It is, Jordan replied, his voice tight. Just give it time. We don't have time. Patrick shifted again, stepping further away from them, his small back pressing against the couch. He was trying to disappear, trying not to be noticed. My chest ached watching it. Why didn't I see this before? I thought, why didn't I notice how scared he was? The argument escalated. Tiffany's voice rose slightly. Jordan ran a hand through his hair, pacing once, then stopping abruptly. Patrick flinched. Actually flinched. My breath caught. He hadn't been hurt, but he had been scared. Deeply. And no one had protected him. Not Jordan. Not Tiffany. Patrick tried to say something. I saw his mouth open, then close again. Tiffany turned sharply toward him, her expression hard, even without sound. I understood the message. Be quiet. Patrick stepped back too quickly, his foot catching on something. He lost his balance, fell, and then, the crying. The same crying I had heard when I walked through the door. Broken, shaking, terrified. I hit pause. The screen froze on Patrick curled on the floor. I couldn't breathe for a second. My chest felt tight, like something inside it was collapsing under the weight of what I had just seen. This wasn't an accident. I realized this wasn't just a child crying. This was something else. Something much worse. I forced myself to keep going. Rewound slightly. Played it again. Slower. Frame by frame. Tiffany was holding something. A folder. I hadn't noticed it before. I leaned closer. Squinting at the screen, she placed it on the table, tapping it sharply as she spoke. Jordan glanced at it, then away. his shoulders tense. My pulse quickened. What is that? I thought. I zoomed in as much as the system allowed. The image blurred slightly, but the label was still partially visible. Medical. The word hit me like a shock. Medical. Tiffany worked in healthcare. She had access to records, files, data. I sat back slowly, my mind racing. This isn't just about today, I whispered. This isn't just about Patrick. My eyes drifted back to the screen. The frozen image of Tiffany. The folder. Jordan's expression. Patrick on the floor. Pieces. They were starting to connect. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough to know this was bigger than I had thought. Much bigger. I scrolled forward again. Past the argument. Past the crying. The footage continued. And then, another segment. Tiffany. Alone. In my house. Moving differently now. Not tense. Not arguing. Focused. Purposeful. She walked toward the table, opened the folder, and started doing something careful. Something deliberate. My hand froze above the screen. My heart pounded louder. Faster. Because whatever she was doing, it wasn't normal. And somehow, I knew. This part was even worse. I replayed the footage again. And again. And again. At first, I thought I was trying to understand what Tiffany was doing. But after the third time, I realized I was looking for something else. Something hidden. Something that didn't belong. I leaned closer to the screen, slowing the playback frame by frame. My eyes tracked every movement, every shift in light, every flicker in the background. That's when I saw it. Not in what was there, but in what wasn't. The timeline. It didn't match. I paused the video and stared at the timestamp. Then I scrubbed backward. Carefully. Slowly. There it was again. A clean jump. Not seconds. Minutes. Gone. Completely gone. No distortion. No lag. No glitch artifacts. Just absence. This isn't a system error, I whispered, because I knew what errors looked like. This was surgical. Precise. Intentional. I felt something inside me settle into place. Cold. Clear. Someone had removed that footage. I glanced over my shoulder. Jordan was still in the living room, scrolling through his phone like nothing mattered. Like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't standing here, watching our life unravel frame by frame. I turned back to the screen and opened the system settings. If someone had accessed the cameras, there would be a record. There had to be. My fingers moved quickly now. Instinct taking over. Years of analyzing data had trained me to trust patterns more than emotions. Patterns didn't lie. People did. I pulled up the access logs. At first glance, everything looked normal. My login. Jordan's login. Routine timestamps. Then I saw it. A remote access entry, not from inside the house. Not from any device I recognized. My breath slowed. Time of access. Earlier that day, exactly when the missing footage occurred, my chest tightened. Someone got in remotely. I thought. Not guessed. Not assumed. Confirmed. I clicked into the details. The device ID was unfamiliar, but the permissions, full access. Admin level. Who had that kind of access? I didn't need long to answer that. Jordan barely knew how to reset a password. Tiffany didn't have system credentials. But Logan. My grip tightened around the edge of the console. Logan had helped set up the system months ago. I remembered it now. At the time, it had seemed harmless. Helpful. Even, let me optimize it for you, he had said. Crouched next to this very panel, typing with quiet confidence. There are a few security upgrades you're missing. I had thanked him. Trusted him. Let him configure everything. I closed my eyes for a second. Flashback. Logan standing in our living room. Calm. Composed. Explaining things in that smooth, reassuring tone. You don't want blind spots, he had said. You want full coverage? He had pointed toward the hallway. especially here. Entry points matter. At the time, it had sounded logical. Now, it sounded calculated. End flashback. I opened my eyes. He didn't just help. I realized he built the system, which meant he knew exactly how to get back in. I exhaled slowly, forcing my thoughts to stay organized. Camera access. Missing footage. Tiffany inside the house. Jordan acting like nothing happened. And now Logan. Connected. Not on the outside. On the inside. This wasn't random. This wasn't messy. This was controlled. I quickly exported the footage. Every clip, every segment, even the ones that looked normal. I saved them to an external drive, then uploaded a copy to a secure cloud account I hadn't used in years. If they had accessed the system once, they could do it again. And next time, they wouldn't leave anything behind. My fingers moved faster now. Deliberate. Efficient. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was building something. A record. A timeline. A case. When I finished, I sat back for a moment, staring at the screen. My reflection stared back at me. Tired. Focused. Different. Then something else clicked. Instinct. The same instinct that had carried me through years of financial investigations. If this is planned, I thought, there's more. There was always more. Plans like this didn't exist in isolation. They spread. They connected. They left traces. And those traces almost always showed up in one place. Money. I stood up and walked quietly to the kitchen, grabbing my laptop. Jordan didn't look up. That, more than anything, told me how confident he was, how safe he felt. Good. I sat down at the table and opened our financial accounts. At first, everything looked normal. Balances, transactions, monthly patterns. Then I started filtering dates, amounts, irregularities. And there it was. A small transfer, easy to miss, followed by another, and another. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. Structured, deliberate, hidden in plain sight. My pulse slowed as my mind sharpened. This isn't spending, I thought. This is movement. I leaned closer, tracking the path of the money, from our joint account to another account I didn't recognize. Then from there, somewhere else, layered, obscured, intentional. I felt it again, that cold clarity settling deeper inside me. They're not just lying. I realized they're hiding something. Something big enough to plan. Something big enough to risk everything. I followed the trail further. One transaction stood out. Larger than the others. More direct. Transferred to a name I knew. My breath caught. I stared at it, willing it to be wrong. But it wasn't. Logan. The screen blurred for a second as everything in my chest tightened. Not just involved. Not just helping. Directly connected. I sat there in silence. The hum of the house around me suddenly louder than before. Everything was shifting now. Every piece falling into place. Jordan. Tiffany. Logan. Not separate. Not accidental. Together. And whatever they were doing. It had been happening long before today. I closed the laptop slowly, because I finally understood something that changed everything. This wasn't a moment. This was a system, and I had just found the first crack in it. I stared at Logan's name on the screen until it stopped looking like a name and started looking like proof. The transfer sat there, clean and undeniable. Amount, date, destination. Not a mistake. Not a coincidence. A pattern. I leaned forward, reopening the transaction history. My fingers moving faster now. I filtered by date, then by amount, then by destination. At first, the numbers looked scattered. Small transfers. Nothing dramatic. The kind of movement no one would question. But when I lined them up, they formed something else. A structure. Deliberate. Layered. I exported the data and pulled it into a spreadsheet, organizing everything chronologically. My eyes scanned down the columns, connecting points instinctively. Transfers every few days, different amounts, different intermediate accounts, all leading to the same place. Logan. My chest tightened. This isn't casual. I thought, this is controlled. I started mapping the flow, from our joint account to smaller accounts, then redirected. Each step designed to make it harder to trace, but not impossible. Not for me. This is layering, I whispered. I had seen it before. People hiding money didn't move it all at once. They broke it down, disguised it, moved it slowly, quietly, until it disappeared into something that looked legitimate. Except it never really disappeared. Not if you knew where to look. I kept going, adding up the totals. My breath slowed as the number climbed. 50,000, 100, 200. I stopped when it passed $400,000. For a second, I just stared at it. That wasn't spending. That wasn't bad decisions. That was extraction. From us. From me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. They were draining our accounts. I realized, not impulsively, not recklessly, strategically. I scrolled further down and clicked into one of the destination accounts. It was linked to a legal consultancy, registered under Logan's name. Of course it was. I let out a short, hollow breath. Legal fees. That's what it would look like on paper. Clean. Justified. Untouchable. Unless someone looked deeper. Unless someone asked the right questions. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing faster than my body could keep up. Jordan wasn't just hiding money. He was moving it. Protecting it. Or maybe, preparing it. I pulled up his recent financial activity. This time, I wasn't looking at what he sent. I was looking at what he lost. And there it was. The real picture. High-risk investments. Failed trades. Sudden withdrawals. Patterns that didn't align with growth, but with damage control. He's losing money. I realized, not small amounts. Not manageable losses. Significant. Enough to panic. Enough to hide. The timeline matched. The more he lost, the more he moved, the more he moved, the more Logan received. This wasn't random. This was a response. A collapse being covered up. My stomach turned. Is that what this is about? I thought. Money. But then Tiffany flashed in my mind. The folder. The medical label. The way she had stood in my house like she belonged there. No, it wasn't just money. I opened another tab and searched for transactions connected to healthcare systems. There were a few. Small charges at first. Then larger ones. All tied to facilities Tiffany had access to. My pulse quickened. She's not just involved. I thought, she's part of it. I clicked into one of the records. Authorization details. User ID. Timestamp. It didn't take long to see the connection. Her access. Her system. My name. A chill ran through me. Why would financial movement connect to medical systems? Unless... I leaned back slowly. The pieces starting to lock into place. Financial control. Legal support. Medical documentation. 3 separate systems. Working together. Not by accident. By design. They're building something. I whispered. Something against me. My eyes drifted toward the hallway, where Patrick's room sat quiet in the distance. Then back to the screen. Back to the numbers. Back to Logan's name. They're not just hiding money. I realized they're preparing to take everything. My throat tightened. Everything. The house. The accounts. And Patrick. Because custody wasn't just about parenting. It was leverage. If I was removed, if I was discredited, if I was declared unstable, Jordan would control everything. Legally. Financially. Completely. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the weight of that settle. Then I opened them again. Sharper. Colder. Focused. I started organizing everything. transactions, dates, connections, footage, documents. Every piece of evidence lined up into one structure, one story, and it all pointed in the same direction. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was a case. A real one. The kind I had built my career on. The kind that ended people. My hands didn't shake anymore. My breathing didn't falter. Something inside me had shifted. Completely. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was thinking, planning. And then, just as I was about to close the system, a notification popped up. A new transaction. Recent? Very recent. I clicked it. My name. Authorized under my identity. Destination. A medical institution. My chest went still. They're already using me. I thought. Not just planning, not just preparing, executing. I stared at the screen. My reflection faintly visible over the numbers. They're not waiting, I whispered. They've already started. And suddenly, this wasn't about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about stopping something that was already in motion. The document wasn't supposed to exist. I found it buried in a shared folder Jordan had forgotten to hide, labeled something bland, something easy to ignore. Reports. Nothing more. I clicked it without thinking. Then I stopped breathing. My name sat at the top of the page. Full legal name. Date of birth. Address. Everything correct. Everything real. Except for one thing. I had never been there. The title read, Psychological Evaluation Report. My fingers went cold on the trackpad as I scrolled. Subject displays signs of emotional instability. Behavioral inconsistencies observed. Potential risk factor in child environment. Each line felt like it had been written to erase me. Not as a person, but as a mother. I kept reading, my eyes scanning every detail, every sentence, every word that wasn't mine. I had never met this doctor, never sat in that office, never answered those questions. And yet, here it was. Official. Structured. Convincing. I leaned closer to the screen. The hospital name. The physician's signature. The formatting. At first glance, it all looked legitimate. But I wasn't looking at it as a patient. I was looking at it as someone trained to spot inconsistencies. And they were there. Subtle. But undeniable. The timestamps didn't align with standard intake procedures. The language used in the report repeated certain phrasing patterns, too consistent, too polished. And the digital signature, it wasn't embedded correctly. This isn't real, I whispered. This was made to look real. My mind moved quickly, connecting what I had already seen. Tiffany, healthcare administrator, access to records, systems, templates. She built this. I realized, not from nothing, from something that looked close enough to the truth to pass. Close enough for someone who wasn't paying attention. I opened another tab and searched for the hospital's internal system access logs, using a contact point I still had from an old project. It took a few minutes. Then I found it. An entry under my name. Timestamp. Earlier that week. User access ID. Not mine. Not Jordan's. Tiffany's. My chest tightened. She didn't just write it, I thought. She put it into the system. Made it official. Made it real. I sat back slowly. My mind racing. This wasn't just manipulation. This was fabrication. Legal-grade fabrication. And if it was already in the system, then it was already in motion. I went back to the folder. There were more files. Drafts. Documents I hadn't opened yet. I clicked the next one. Custody petition. Prepared by Logan. My throat went dry as I read. Petitioner requests full custody of minor child due to concerns regarding respondent's mental stability. Respondent. That was me. Attached evidence. The evaluation report. Behavioral observations. Incident notes. I froze. Incident notes. I opened the file. Descriptions of behavior I didn't recognize. Emotional outburst. Inconsistent responses. Unstable reactions in home environment. I stared at the screen. They're building a narrative. I realized, not just a case, a story. One where I wasn't fit. One where I was the problem. And the more I read, the more complete it became. Timeline. Supporting evidence. Professional validation. All aligned. Already. I scrolled further. And then I saw Patrick's name. My heart dropped. Statements referencing his behavior. Child appears distressed in presence of mother. Signs of emotional discomfort. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping softly against the floor. No, I whispered. No. 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 They were using him. Not protecting him. Not caring for him. Using him as proof. As leverage. I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to steady my breathing. I thought back to earlier, to the way he looked at Jordan before answering me, to the way he stayed silent, to the way he flinched. That's not about me, I thought. That's about them. They were twisting it, rewriting it, turning his fear into evidence against me. I sat down again slowly, my hands no longer shaking, not because I wasn't afraid, but because something else had taken its place. Clarity. Cold. Precise. I opened the audio recordings I had started collecting. Background noise at first. Then voices. Jordan. Logan. Low. Controlled. Strategic. Timing matters. Logan was saying. We file right after the evaluation, and if she resists, she won't have enough to fight it. Silence. Then Jordan's voice. We're close. My chest tightened. They weren't discussing possibilities. They were discussing execution. This wasn't a plan anymore. It was a schedule. I closed the file and sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Everything was in place. Financial movement. Medical fabrication. Legal structure. A complete system designed to remove me, not emotionally. Legally. Permanently. They're not reacting to me. I thought, they've been preparing for this. For weeks. Maybe longer. I felt it then. The weight of it. The fear. The anger. The realization that the person I had trusted most had been building this quietly, piece by piece. For a moment, it almost overwhelmed me. Almost. Then I exhaled slowly, and something inside me shifted. Again. Not breaking. Reforming. I reached forward and started copying everything. Every file. Every document. Every piece of evidence. I saved it to an external drive. Then another copy. Then a third. Different locations. Different access points. They could delete the originals. They could hide the files. But they couldn't erase what I now had. I leaned back and looked at the screen one more time. The report. The petition. My name. Rewritten. Controlled. Distorted. They think this is the end, I whispered. That this is how they take everything. I closed the laptop slowly, because now I understood something they didn't. They thought I was the weakest part of this system. The easiest piece to remove. They were wrong, and for the first time since this started, I wasn't afraid of what they were doing. I was ready for it. I decided to become invisible. Not by leaving, not by hiding, but by staying exactly where I was and letting them believe I had no idea what was happening. The next morning, I moved through the house like nothing had changed. Same routine, same tone, same quiet version of myself they were used to. Do you want coffee? I asked Jordan, standing in the kitchen like I had 100 times before. He glanced up briefly, surprised just for a second, then nodded. Yeah, no suspicion, no tension, just normal. I poured the coffee, set the cup in front of him, and forced my hands to stay steady. Inside, everything was sharp, focused. Watching, I sat across from him, scrolling through my phone, pretending to be distracted, pretending to be tired, pretending to be exactly the version of me they had already written into their story. Weak, unaware, easy to control. Jordan relaxed almost immediately. I could see it in the way his shoulders dropped, the way his voice softened when he spoke again. "You okay?" he asked casually. I shrugged. "Just tired." "Work's been a lot." He nodded like that made sense, like it explained everything. Good. That's what I needed. For him to stop looking too closely. For him to believe he was still ahead. I watched him out of the corner of my eye as he checked his phone. Completely at ease now. That was the first confirmation. He didn't think I knew. And that meant he wouldn't hide as carefully anymore. After he left the room, I stood up slowly and walked toward the security panel. This time, I didn't hesitate. I accessed the system settings and moved quickly through the interface, changing permissions, rerouting access logs, creating a hidden administrative layer only I could reach. They had gotten in once. They wouldn't get in again. At least not without me knowing. I created backups of everything, again, and this time, I added something else. A silent tracker. If anyone tried to access the system remotely, I would know. Immediately. I stepped back and exhaled. The house felt different now. Not because anything had changed, but because I could finally see it clearly. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a space I was analyzing, a system I was watching, and they were moving inside it, unaware they were being observed. I returned to the kitchen and opened my laptop, pulling up the files I had collected, video, transactions, documents. I began organizing them more precisely now, not just saving them, structuring them, building something coherent, a timeline, dates, events, connections, every piece placed where it belonged. The more I worked, the clearer it became. This wasn't chaos. This was design. And like any design, it had flaws. I just needed to find them. Later that afternoon, I sat in the living room with Patrick, helping him with a puzzle. He stayed close to me, quieter than usual, his movements careful. I watched him gently, not pushing, not forcing anything. "Do you like this one?" I asked, holding up a piece. He nodded slightly. Then, after a long pause, he whispered, "I don't like her." I froze for a second. "Who?" I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. His fingers tightened around the puzzle piece. Then, barely audible, "The lady." My chest tightened. "Tiffany." I didn't react, didn't push, just nodded slowly. "It's okay," I said. "You don't have to like everyone." He looked up at me, searching my face, then nodded again, a little more certain this time. That was enough. For now. I didn't need him to say more. I already knew. That evening, Jordan came home later than usual. He seemed relaxed, almost confident, like everything was going according to plan. "Long day?" I asked casually. "Yeah," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "Just wrapping things up." Wrapping things up. I nodded like I understood. Like I believed that meant work. But I knew better now. Later, when he stepped outside to take a call, I moved quietly toward the hallway. His voice was low, but not low enough. "She hasn't noticed anything?" he said. A pause. Then, "Yeah, we're almost there." My heart didn't race. It didn't need to. Because I had already reached the conclusion before he said it. This just confirmed it. They weren't guessing. They weren't hoping. They were certain. Certain that I was still in the dark. I stepped back before he could see me, returning to the kitchen just as he came back inside. He didn't notice anything. Didn't question anything. That was the second confirmation. He trusted the illusion. And the more he trusted it, the more he would expose. That night, after everything went quiet, I sat alone in the living room with my laptop. I reviewed the recordings I had gathered so far. Fragments of conversations, patterns of speech, pieces of truth hidden in ordinary moments. One file caught my attention. I hadn't labeled it clearly, just a timestamp. I hovered over it for a second, then clicked. The audio began to play. Two voices, Jordan and Tiffany. Clearer than before. Closer. More direct. I leaned forward slowly, my eyes fixed on the screen, my entire body still, because whatever was in this file, I knew it mattered. I just didn't know how much yet. And as their voices continued, I realized I was about to find out. The date stared back at me like a countdown I couldn't ignore. Evaluation day. It was sitting there in Jordan's calendar. Clean and official, like something I had agreed to. But I hadn't. My chest tightened as I checked the date again. 3 days. That was all I had. 3 days before they turned their plan into something legal. Something that couldn't be undone with just truth. I sat there for a moment, letting the pressure settle in. Then I picked up my phone. I needed confirmation. Not assumptions. Not theories. Facts. I dialed the number listed on the document. Masking my caller ID, a calm voice answered. Good afternoon. How may I help you? I kept my tone neutral. Controlled. I'm calling to confirm an appointment, I said. Name is Olivia Carter. A pause. Typing in the background. Yes. I see it here, the voice replied. Psychological evaluation scheduled this week. My fingers tightened around the phone. And who requested it? I asked. Referral submitted by Jordan Carter. Of course it was. And the urgency level. Another pause. High priority. High priority. I closed my eyes for a second. They weren't just planning this. They were accelerating it. Thank you, I said quietly. Then ended the call. The room felt smaller now. Tighter. Like the walls were closing in around a plan that was already moving forward without me. I opened my laptop again and pulled up the documents Logan had prepared. This time, I read them differently. Not as someone being accused, but as someone studying a system. The custody petition was already complete. Dates aligned. Arguments structured. Evidence attached. The evaluation report would be the final piece. Once it was submitted, everything else would fall into place. Step 1. Declare me unstable. Step 2. File for emergency custody. Step 3. Transfer control. Assets. Decisions. Everything. I leaned back slowly. They didn't just plan this, I whispered. They perfected it. My eyes moved to the supporting documents again, then to the medical report, then to the transaction logs. 3 separate systems, all pointing in the same direction. Financial, medical, legal. Each one reinforcing the other. If one failed, the others would still hold. It was airtight. Or at least, that's what they believed. I shifted my focus to Tiffany. Her access logs, her entries in the system. There were more than I had noticed before. Multiple timestamps. Different days. Each one adding another layer to the false narrative. She's building consistency. I realized, not just a single report. A pattern. A history. Something that would look real under scrutiny. My stomach turned. This wasn't just manipulation. This was construction. Deliberate. Careful. Dangerous. I closed the file and stood up, walking slowly toward the living room. Patrick was sitting on the floor again, quieter than usual, playing with a different toy now. I watched him for a moment. The way his movements were slower, more cautious, like he was thinking before he acted, before he spoke. Hey, I said softly, sitting beside him. He looked up at me. There was something in his eyes now, not just fear. Awareness. They're affecting him. I thought, even when I'm not here. Jordan walked into the room a moment later. Everything okay? He asked casually. I nodded. Yeah? Just tired. He studied me for a second. Long enough to check. Not long enough to care. Then he looked at Patrick. How are you? Buddy, he asked. Patrick didn't answer. He just looked down. Jordan smiled slightly. Like that was normal. Like that silence didn't mean anything. But I saw it now. Clearly, this wasn't parenting. This was conditioning. Subtle. Controlled. They weren't just building a case against me. They were shaping the environment around it. I stood up slowly. "I think I'll rest for a bit," I said. Jordan nodded. "Good idea." Of course it was. Because the more I withdrew, the stronger their narrative became. Unstable. Withdrawn. Disconnected. I walked back to the bedroom and closed the door quietly. Then I turned around and leaned against it, letting the mask drop for just a second. 3 days. That was the timeline. That was the window. Fear crept in for a moment. Sharp. Real. What if I'm too late? I thought, what if they've already done enough? I closed my eyes, pressing my hand against my chest. No, this wasn't over. Not yet. I pushed myself off the door and walked back to the desk, opened the laptop, pulled everything up again. And this time, I didn't look at it as a threat. I looked at it as a structure. Every system they built had one weakness. It had to be consistent. And consistency could be broken. I started reorganizing my files. Not just collecting, positioning. Aligning contradictions. Timestamps that didn't match. Access logs that overlapped. Records that proved impossibility. They made it too perfect, I whispered. And perfect things don't survive scrutiny. I stopped for a moment, staring at the screen. Then I made the decision. I wouldn't stop them. I wouldn't interrupt. I wouldn't expose anything early. I would let them go forward. Let them bring everything into the open. Into one place. One moment. Where everything could collapse at once. My fingers moved again. Faster now. Building. Refining. Preparing. They think the hearing is the end. I thought. It's not. It's the moment they lose control. A notification appeared on the screen. A new file? Uploaded recently. I clicked it. Emergency custody filing, pending submission. Prepared. Complete. Ready? My name. Their words. Their version of me. I stared at it for a long moment, then slowly closed the laptop. They're ready, I whispered. And for the first time since this started, I felt something different. Not fear. Not anger. Control. Because now, so was I. I let the recording play all the way through. I didn't pause it. I didn't rewind. I didn't need to, because every word that came through the speakers confirmed what I already knew. Once the evaluation is done, it's over, Tiffany said, her voice low but clear. Jordan responded immediately. Yeah, she won't be able to fight it. A pause. Then Tiffany again. Are you sure she hasn't noticed anything? Jordan let out a quiet breath. She's not paying attention. She never does. I stared at the screen, my reflection faint over the audio waveform. He really believed that I wasn't paying attention, that I never had. And that belief was exactly what I needed. I closed the file slowly and sat back, letting the silence settle around me. There was no doubt left now, no uncertainty, no missing piece. They were aligned. All of them. Jordan, Tiffany, Logan. And they weren't guessing anymore. They were executing. I opened my notes and began reconstructing everything from the beginning. Not just events. Sequence. Timing. Cause and effect. Step by step. Jordan's financial losses. The transfers to Logan. Tiffany's system access. The fabricated report. The custody filing. Each piece connected to the next with precision. Like a machine. And like any machine, it depended on timing. I checked the calendar again. The evaluation, the filing, the hearing. Everything stacked within days. Tight. Controlled. Predictable. They built this to move fast. I thought, so no one would have time to react. I leaned forward, my mind already shifting. If timing was their strength, it could also be their weakness. Because if everything depended on one moment, then that moment could be turned. I opened another set of records. Tiffany's financial activity. At first, it looked clean. Stable income. Regular transactions. Nothing unusual. But then I filtered by incoming transfers. And there it was. Jordan. Payments. Increasing over time. Not labeled clearly. Not tied to any formal agreement. Just money. Moving quietly. My eyes narrowed. She thinks she's benefiting. I realized. But she's part of the same system. I traced the pattern further. The amounts didn't match services. They didn't match any logical compensation. They matched control. Jordan wasn't just working with her. He was managing her, using her, and sooner or later, that would turn on her too. For a moment, I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should I tell her? Should I let her know what was really happening? That she wasn't winning anything. That she was just another piece. I sat back in my chair, the thought lingering. Then I shook my head slowly. No, she had already chosen her side. She had already stepped into this. And if I interfered now, I would only weaken my position. She made her choice. I whispered. Now I make mine. I closed her file and returned to my main folder. Everything I had gathered. Everything I had built. It was time to consolidate. I created a master file. One document. One structure. Clear. Linear. Impossible to ignore. Video evidence. Financial records. Medical fabrication. Audio recordings. Each section labeled, each piece placed exactly where it belonged. No gaps. No confusion. No room for interpretation. This wasn't just evidence anymore. This was a case. And I wasn't building it to understand. I was building it to present. To break them. I saved the file. Then copied it. External drive. Cloud storage. Encrypted backup. Then one more step. I sent a copy to someone I trusted. Not with details. Not with explanation. Just enough to ensure that if anything happened, the truth wouldn't disappear. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment. Everything was ready. Almost. There was one thing left. Timing. I couldn't move too early. If I exposed everything now, they would adjust. Deny. Delay. But if I waited, if I let them move forward, if I let them believe they had already won, then they would walk straight into it. The hearing. That was the moment. That was where everything would come together. Where all their systems would align. And where I could break all of them at once. I opened my eyes and stood up. From the hallway, I heard voices. Jordan. And Logan. Low. Confident. Everything is ready, Logan was saying. She won't be able to stop it. Jordan let out a quiet laugh. I know. I stood there for a second, just listening. Then I turned and walked away before they could notice me. That was all I needed. Confirmation. They were entering the final phase. So was I. Later that night, I packed a small bag. Not enough to draw attention. Just essentials. Documents. Clothes for Patrick. Things we might need quickly. I placed it carefully in the back of the closet, just in case. Then I sat beside Patrick as he slept, watching his small chest rise and fall. He looked peaceful. Finally, for the first time in days, I reached out and brushed his hair gently. I've got you, I whispered. No matter what. The next morning would come. The hearing would happen. They would speak. They would present. They would try to erase me. I stood up slowly and walked to the window, staring out into the quiet street. Somewhere inside that silence, everything was about to change. They think tomorrow is the end, I thought. They think this is where they win. A small, controlled smile touched my lips. They're wrong, because tomorrow was exactly where I needed them to be. I woke up before the alarm. The house was still dark, wrapped in that quiet that only exists before everything begins to move. For a moment, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to my own breathing. Today was the day, not the day everything ended, the day everything revealed itself. I turned my head and looked at Patrick sleeping beside me. His small hand rested near his face, his expression calm, untouched by everything waiting outside this room. I let myself watch him for a few seconds longer than I should have. Then I got up. I dressed simply. Nothing sharp. Nothing bold. Soft colors. Neutral tones. The kind of appearance that didn't demand attention. The kind of woman they expected to see. Tired. Fragile. Unstable. I looked at myself in the mirror. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because she was broken, but because she was controlled. Every expression measured. Every emotion contained. Perfect. I walked into the kitchen. Jordan was already there. Coffee in hand. Calm. Confident. Like this was just another day. Morning, he said, glancing at me briefly. Morning, I replied, keeping my voice soft. He studied me for a second, then nodded slightly, like I had passed some kind of test. You ready? He asked. I hesitated. Just enough. I guess, I said quietly. He smiled. Not warm. Satisfied. Good. That was exactly what he needed to see. Logan arrived a few minutes later. Sharp suit. Clean lines. Perfect posture. He didn't greet me. Didn't acknowledge me beyond a brief glance that lasted less than a second. To him, I wasn't a person in this situation. I was a problem already solved. Everything's prepared, he said to Jordan. Flipping open a folder, Jordan nodded. I know. Their confidence filled the room. Thick. Unquestioned. I stood there, silent, letting it surround me. Letting them believe it. We drove in silence. Patrick stayed with the sitter. Safe. Away from this. Away from them. That mattered more than anything. The building was cold when we walked in. Not physically. Emotionally. Everything about it felt controlled. Structured. Like outcomes were decided long before anyone spoke. We entered the room. Long table. Neutral walls. People already seated. Papers arranged neatly in front of them. I took my place quietly. Jordan sat beside me. Logan across from us. Tiffany entered last. She avoided my eyes. But I noticed the tension in her shoulders. The slight hesitation in her steps. She wasn't as confident as the others. Good. The proceedings began quickly. Logan spoke first. Clear. Measured. Confident. He presented the case like it was already decided. Medical report. Behavioral concerns. Emotional instability. Each word placed carefully. Each sentence designed to build one thing. A version of me? One I didn't recognize. Tiffany followed. Professional tone. Clinical language. She confirmed the report. Supported the claims. Made it sound real. Convincing. Jordan spoke last. Soft voice. Concerned husband. Careful pauses. I just want what's best for our son, he said. The words almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I kept my expression neutral. My posture slightly slouched. My hands resting loosely in my lap. Exactly what they expected. When they turned to me, I hesitated. Just enough. I don't really understand what's happening, I said quietly. My voice wavered. Controlled. But imperfect. I let my words trail slightly. Let the silence stretch. Let them see what they wanted to see. Uncertainty. Weakness. Confusion. It worked. I could feel the shift in the room. Subtle, but real. Eyes changed. Posture changed. Doubt began to lean in their direction. Logan pressed forward immediately. She's been displaying these patterns consistently, he said. Tiffany nodded. Jordan looked down. Like this was painful for him. The performance was flawless. And I let it continue. I answered questions softly, occasionally pausing too long, letting my responses feel incomplete. Not enough to break, just enough to support their narrative. Every move calculated, every reaction intentional. Inside, I was watching everything, tracking every word, every shift, every assumption they made. They're all in, I thought. No hesitation. Which meant no escape. Logan leaned forward. We request immediate action, he said firmly. The room grew quieter, the weight of the moment settling. Everything they had built was converging here. Right now, I lowered my gaze slightly, let my shoulders drop, played the part until the very last second. Then they asked me, "Do you have anything to add?" The silence that followed felt heavier than anything before. I lifted my head slowly, looked at Jordan, then Logan, then Tiffany, one by one. And for the first time that day, I didn't look unsure. I didn't look fragile. I didn't look like the woman they had described. I reached into my bag, slowly, deliberately. Jordan's expression shifted, just slightly. Confusion. Logan frowned. Tiffany's breath caught. I pulled out a folder, placed it on the table in front of me. The sound it made was quiet, but it cut through the room. Clean. Final. I looked up and spoke. "I do," I said calmly. And in that moment, everything changed. The room didn't breathe. It held itself still the moment I opened the folder. Jordan's eyes dropped to it first, then snapped back up to me, searching for something, hesitation, fear, anything that would fit the version of me he had built. There was none. Logan leaned forward slightly, his expression tightening, already calculating what this could be. Tiffany didn't move at all. She just stared. I slid the first document across the table. "Before we continue," I said evenly, "I think it's important that everything is presented in full context." No one interrupted me. Not yet. I tapped the tablet in front of me and turned it so everyone could see. The video loaded. At first, it looked ordinary. Patrick on the floor, playing, quiet, normal. Then the timestamp shifted. Then Tiffany entered the frame. The silence in the room deepened. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. They were watching now. Really watching. Jordan shifted in his seat. "That doesn't," he started. I held up my hand slightly. "Let it play." He stopped. Because for the first time, he didn't control the room. The footage continued. Tiffany moving through the house. Confident. Uninvited. Patrick freezing. The argument. The tension. The moment he stepped back. Fell. Started crying. I paused it there. No commentary. Just the image. A child on the floor. Afraid. The room changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But completely. "That's not the full context," Logan said quickly, his voice sharper now. "We don't know what happened before." "There's a gap," I said calmly. "Yes." I tapped again. "Which is interesting, because the system logs show remote access at the exact time that footage was removed." I placed the access logs on the table. Timestamps aligned. Device ID listed. Logan's name attached through his registered system credentials. His jaw tightened. "That proves nothing," he said. "Access doesn't imply intent. Then let's talk about intent." I slid the next set of documents forward. Financial records. Structured transfers. Layered accounts. Every path clearly mapped. Over $400,000, I said. Moved from joint assets into accounts connected to your consultancy. Logan's hand hovered over the papers but didn't touch them. Jordan leaned forward. "That was legal. Then you won't mind explaining the pattern," I said, meeting his eyes. He didn't answer. Because there wasn't a clean explanation. There never had been. I let the silence sit. Then I moved on. "Now let's address the medical report." Tiffany stiffened. I placed the document beside the others. The evaluation I supposedly attended. I tapped the screen again. Access logs appeared. Her credentials. Her timestamps. Her entries. "You created this," I said quietly. Her lips parted. "Closed." "I didn't," she began. "You accessed the system multiple times under my name." I continued. "You entered data that matches this report exactly." Her composure cracked. "Just slightly, but enough." Jordan looked at her, then back at me. The foundation was starting to shift. I leaned back slightly. There was one more piece, the one that mattered most. I pressed play. The audio filled the room, Once the evaluation is done, it's over. Tiffany's voice. Clear. Unmistakable. She won't be able to fight it. Jordan. Calm. Certain. Then Logan. We file immediately after. She won't have time to respond. No one spoke. No one moved. The recording continued for a few seconds longer. Then I stopped it. And the silence that followed was different now. Heavy. Unavoidable. Logan was the first to react. This is taken out of context, he said quickly. But the confidence was gone. We were discussing legal strategy. For a fabricated case, I said. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Because there was no clean way out of that sentence. Jordan pushed back from the table slightly, running a hand through his hair. This isn't what it looks like, he said, his voice rising just enough to betray him. It's exactly what it looks like, I replied. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he turned. Not to me. To Tiffany. You said this was handled, he snapped. Her eyes flashed. Don't put this on me, she shot back. You're the one who... She stopped. Too late. The damage was already done. They weren't aligned anymore. They were unraveling. Right in front of everyone. Logan tried to recover. Tried to pull it back. But his voice no longer carried the same weight. The structure he had built was collapsing under its own contradictions. Officials at the table exchanged looks. Papers were shifted. Notes taken. The tone of the room had changed completely. Not uncertainty. Not hesitation. Recognition. This wasn't a weak case anymore. It was evidence. Real. Structured. Undeniable. Jordan leaned forward again, his voice lower now. Olivia, we can talk about this, he said. For the first time that day, he sounded unsure. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And felt nothing. No anger. No pain. No attachment. Just clarity. This isn't a conversation, I said quietly. It's the truth. Tiffany looked down at the table, her hands trembling slightly. Logan sat back, his posture rigid, his mind still searching for something to hold on to. But there was nothing left. They had built everything on control, and now they had none. I stayed where I was, still, calm, watching as everything they had planned, everything they had believed, collapsed around them. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was something simpler. The truth. Finally standing on its own. I didn't say anything when it ended. Not right away. The room had already shifted before anyone spoke. You could feel it in the way people sat straighter. In the way papers were no longer treated like assumptions, but evidence. Jordan didn't look at me. Not anymore. He kept his eyes fixed somewhere on the table. Like if he didn't move, this might somehow reverse itself. Logan tried once more to speak, but his voice didn't carry the same authority. The words came out controlled. But hollow. Tiffany didn't speak at all. She just sat there, staring at the documents in front of her like they had betrayed her. Maybe they had. Or maybe she had just realized too late that she was never in control of any of it. I stayed still, calm, watching it all unfold without needing to say another word. Because I didn't need to. Everything that mattered had already been said. The officials began discussing next steps quietly, their tone measured but decisive. The case that had been built against me was no longer standing. It had collapsed, and in its place, something else was forming. Investigation, consequences, accountability. I heard Jordan shift beside me. He turned slightly, like he wanted to say something. I didn't look at him. Olivia, he started, his voice lower now. Not confident, not controlled, just uncertain. I stood up. That was my answer. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he stood too, reaching out slightly like he could still pull this back. We can fix this, he said quickly. We just need to... No, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to... It stopped him anyway. There was no anger in it. No emotion at all. Just certainty. We can't... He stared at me. searching my face for something that wasn't there anymore. The woman he had built his plan around. She didn't exist. Not anymore. This didn't just break, I continued quietly. It showed me exactly what it was. He opened his mouth again, then closed it. Because there was nothing left to argue, Tiffany finally looked up. For a brief second, our eyes met. There was something there. Regret. Fear. Maybe even realization. But I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to her either. Logan stayed seated, rigid, already retreating into whatever strategy he thought might still protect him. But I could see it, even without hearing it. He knew. It was over. I turned and walked toward the door. No rush. No hesitation. Just forward. Each step felt lighter than the one before. Like something I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been set down. Outside. The air felt different. Cleaner. Quieter. I stopped for a moment. Just breathing. Really breathing. For the first time in days. Then I saw Patrick. Waiting. Safe. The moment he saw me, he ran toward me, wrapping his arms around me without saying a word. I knelt down and held him tightly. "I've got you," I whispered. He nodded against my shoulder. And just like that, everything that mattered was exactly where it needed to be. We walked to the car together. No rush. No fear. Just movement. Forward. Inside the car. It was quiet for a few seconds. Patrick looked at me, his small voice soft. "Are we okay now?" I smiled. Not forced. Not fragile. Real.
Yes,
I said. "We're okay." He leaned back into his seat, his body relaxing in a way I hadn't seen in days. That alone was enough. More than enough. A few weeks later, everything had changed. The house. Gone. The routine. Different. The silence. Peaceful now. Not heavy. We moved to a smaller place. Quieter. Safer. Somewhere that didn't carry the weight of what had happened. I rebuilt slowly. Not just the life around me, but myself. There were moments I thought about it. The betrayal. The lies. The way everything had been constructed so carefully behind my back. But those thoughts didn't stay long, because they didn't belong to my future. They belonged to something I had already left behind. I didn't lose everything. I lost what was never real to begin with. And in return, I kept what mattered. My son. My clarity. My control. I watched Patrick playing in the living room one afternoon, his laughter filling the space in a way it hadn't before. Free. Unafraid. And I realized something I hadn't understood at the beginning. This wasn't about revenge. It was about seeing the truth and choosing what to do with it. I could have stayed. I could have tried to fix something that was already broken long before I noticed. But I didn't. I chose to walk away. And that choice changed everything. If you had been in my place, what would you have done? Would you have stayed, hoping things could go back to what they were? Or would you have walked away the moment you saw the truth? I'm curious what you think. Tell me your story. And if you believe that seeing clearly, even when it hurts, is the first step to taking your life back, then stay with me. There are more stories like this, and some of them might feel a little closer to home than you expect. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.